What's going on, guys? So many of you asked me to make a video on burnout, and that's exactly what this is about. I'm going to define burnout and then actually give you 3 ways to combat it, all based on the research that I've done pretty extensively and also personal experience. So let's get to it. All right, so today we're going to talk all about burnout, as I mentioned. The overview is, of course, I'm going to give a disclaimer. Although everything I'm going to provide you is based on personal experience and actual scientific data, I by no means am an expert on burnout, and of course, I have not devoted my entire career to this. I'm just relaying information that I found in the literature that will be helpful. So I'm going to start by defining what burnout is, and then I'm also going to talk about 3 ways to diminish it, based on objective data again and personal experience. So let's start with the definition. Burnout is essentially feeling so emotionally drained that you cannot focus on your job. And this often happens when you feel like the work that you're doing isn't actually amounting to anything. So the reason why you can often think about this is you can often think about it in terms of the professions that have the most burnout. So medicine and teaching are often 2 professions where you can have a lot of burnout. And the reason for this is because in both of these professions, there is the potential where you can actually be working immensely long hours and feel like your work doesn't end up doing as much as you would hope it would, right? Like, for example, if you put yourself in the shoes of a teacher and you're a teacher and you realize all of this work that I'm doing, and maybe the students aren't cooperative, or I can personally say I've seen a lot of physicians who do so much, and at the end of the day, they're just so tired, and then their patients still end up passing away, right? There's just so much in both of these professions that can cause burnout. And oftentimes, burnout can lead people to quit their job, because if you feel like your work isn't doing anything, like you aren't making a dent in what you are aspiring to do, then why even do it? So ultimately, I do want to emphasize burnout is a real thing, and it should not be misconstrued with stress, right? Because the last thing I want is for people to think they're burned out when they're stressed. So stress often is actually a positive force, right? So if you can think about when you're stressed, it's because you have a negative connotation with a certain amount of work, but it often is good because it gets you to finish that work. Burnout is almost like on an entirely different level. You feel emotionally exhausted. You're not motivated at all. This is not feeling your purpose, right? Stress is slightly different. So I don't want us to conflate the two. Today we're talking explicitly about burnout. And now that we've defined the issue, let's talk about 3 ways to get around it, because I personally have felt a little bit of this, and I've talked to enough people and read enough stuff that there are strategies around it. So the first one is to surround yourself with the right people. And there's multiple people that will be right? Because again, if we're defining burnout as feeling so emotionally exhausted that you feel like your work doesn't matter, a big part of that is the people who surround you. So for example, in my case, right, I'm not saying I'm burnt out at all, but the people around me include my friends. That's one group. It also includes my family. That's another group. And third group is probably like Yale as an institution. That's the third group that surrounds me. And so if and when I am burnt out, having people around me that can remind me and put things back into perspective is absolutely essential. Because when you hit these roadblocks, those roadblocks are not independent and individual, right? For you to feel like your work is meaningless, you also have to be in an environment that supports that intuition. But if you don't have that environment, that's actually a very big positive. And that's actually one of the cited ways. And Adam Grant talks a lot about this a lot, and we're going to refer to him later on in the conversation as well. Having people around you that can reorient and reshape your perspective when you feel like you aren't making a difference is absolutely essential. So for example, if you're a physician, you feel like your work isn't doing anything, but then you talk to one of your patients or you talk to your friend or your mom, and they're like, dude, you are touching hundreds of lives every day. And even just by changing one person's opinion on one small thing, you could be adding, an extra few months or extra few years to their life. It just takes that stimulus to say, oh my God, you're right. It takes that amount to feel like, oh, I am making a difference. And when you feel that is already combating burnout, right? So surrounding yourself with the right people is one way to combat burnout. And oftentimes, you may not even know that you have that group. So if you start feeling these levels of emotional exhaustion, tap into these groups around you. Dr. Vivek Murthy, in one of my previous videos, talks about really tapping into those groups when you feel these aspects of emotional exhaustion. Because sometimes those people will tell you exactly what it is you need to hear to get yourself out of that mindset. The second way to combat burnout is reflect, right? Sometimes, and what makes burnout so difficult is you don't know it's happening until it happens. And it's very elusive. You don't even know you're emotionally exhausted. And then one day you're like, screw everything. So one way to get around this is by having constant reflection, right? And I think about myself, and I personally think one of the times I felt the most burnt out is when I had to take step one and step two back to back. I had 8 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day of studying in a row for almost 6 to 7 months in a row. And that is not humane for anyone, let alone someone who is already like a little mentally weak, right? And I consider myself pretty mentally weak. And I felt so burnt out. But the problem was, it happened so gradually and so difficult for me to recognize that it happened. And I was like, oh my God. And I actually had already burnt out and I didn't even know it. But had I taken the time to really reflect on my emotions and my experiences throughout that time, I think I would have been able to be like, oh my God, this is not worth it. The amount of exhaustion and paranoia and all of this stuff that I'm putting myself through is just not worth it. Pre-reg, give yourself an extra 3 hours. Go outside, enjoy the sun, go spend time with your family, go hang out with people that mean a lot to you. Stop studying, for heaven's sake. I wish I could have done that. And all that would have taken is a little bit of self-reflection every night to say, how do I feel right now? There's many more important things than this test. There's many other things I need to worry about, right? And that self-reflection is really, really important because it makes you aware of your feelings and allows you to actively work towards negating the negatives and focusing on the positives, right? And the one tip I have for everyone is to get a therapist. The reason why therapists are so damn effective is because they can tell you these things. They often ask you the very questions you need to make those adequate reflections. And because people don't ask themselves those questions, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I feel so out of it? Why have I felt so out of it for the last 3 weeks? What are the common themes that have led me to feel these ways? When you can reflect on it, determine what's causing it, you can then actually make a change. So reflect, reflect, reflect. And if you find it hard to do, get a therapist, especially if you're starting to feel these aspects of emotions coming up that you just don't know how to deal with, right? And this brings me to my third point. The most important way to combat burnout is through something called small wins. Small wins, right? And this kind of ties back to our last point of reflection. What are small wins? This is Adam Grant. I love that man. He's a psychologist, world renowned, but basically he says small wins are very clutch, right? Because sometimes you may think that the solution to burnout is to work less because you're working so much, but sometimes it's actually to work more in the way of small wins. What are small wins? Small wins are positive beats in your day that add purpose to your life. In my case, my Instagram post, these YouTube videos, my vlogs, and me FaceTiming my family, or even like a patient encounter. I remember one patient encounter where the little kid of a patient I was working with gave me a poster that said, "Thank you for helping my mom." I, to this day, have that poster with me. That was a small win because now the 300 next patients I have, and I haven't even had that many yet, but let's say all of them, and I just feel like I'm not doing enough, and those patients don't end up having great outcomes, and those just make me burn out. That small win is enough to keep me going because I'm realizing I am making a difference, right? These YouTube videos, when I vlog, when I self-reflect, when I'm able to talk about these things with you guys, that's a small win for me because one, it allows me to reflect, but two, it's a bright spot to my day. My Instagram posts when I talk about, oh my God, I was able to publish something, or oh my God, it's my dad's birthday today. Those are all me reminding myself of the small wins I have in my life that I should not just become habituated to, right? So by having these small wins, you will then reflect on yourself and be able to say, wow, life's great. And even though this work seems futile at times, I have a lot of these positive things that I can reflect on and know that I am making a difference. Because at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to, right? So to summarize, we defined what burnout was. We went over 3 ways to get over it. The first one being surrounding yourself with the right people, like your family, your friends, the organization you work at. Second one being reflect, really reflect. That can come in the form of Instagram posts, that can come in the form of journaling, that can come in the form of talking to your therapist. And the third one is to have small wins. Small wins are very clutch. You will be very happy, reflect on them, you earned them, you made a difference, right? So with all that being said, I hope this helps define burnout. I hope this helps anyone listening to this video. Even if it does, drop a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I genuinely do hope this was helpful for all of you. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.